Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christy, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. As always, we are in for a treat today. I have my new friend Lisa here with me, and we are going to learn a lot about why you shouldn't be afraid of change, which I'm so ready for. But before we get into all of that, if you're not already following Productive Joy, today's your day. Make sure that you hit follow. I promise you won't be disappointed. I am meeting some really brilliant people who have great things to say, and I want to make sure that you hear them, but you won't hear them if you don't follow. So do that for me. And I want to go ahead and introduce you to today's guest. So today we have with us Lisa DeAngelis. So Lisa is lots of things. She's a New Yorker. She is a teacher and a speaker. She's also a coffee and whiskey enthusiast, although I didn't ask if those things ever go together, which I'm really curious about. She's also a classically trained singer, a culture lover, and she loves nothing more than new experiences. So today's a new experience for you, Lisa. Welcome to Productive Joy.
Absolutely. Every day is a new experience. I was just sharing with you one of my favorite things about living in New York City is that I can walk down a different street every day and have a completely new experience. And it's really a reflection of how I try to see the world on a really regular basis. And I just love that. I love that about life.
I love that too. Well, and you mentioned that, it is fall. And so I can only imagine how beautiful it is right now to walk down those streets and see the changing of the leaves. And that fits so beautifully into what you do because you're kind of a master of change or a guru, if you will. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think change has gotten a really bad rap over the years. It's something that people sort of go, no. I always joke that if you saw change calling on your phone, how would you react? And a lot of people would go, oh, ooh, 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 I don't
Yeah.
want to answer that call, right? But I really have come to dig in deeply to this concept that change is the friend we never knew we always needed. And to develop any sort of relationship, any sort of friendship, we really have to give it some investment and we've got to bring these elements that create connection, right? The things that make us happy, that light us up just as much as the things that allow us to go deeper. And
Yeah.
those things I think can be held together, but it's just really challenging when we live in a space where we've already decided what change is going to be to us. So I'm on a mission to sort of flip that on its head and really reframe the way we think about change, have our relationship with change, and then can apply it to our lives.
Oh my gosh. Well, then y'all buckle your safety belts because I think we're going to be in a perfect journey of a masterclass in change. I am so excited, Lisa. So excited. And I usually have to ask somebody to give us like a 30-second version of why people would want to keep listening, but I didn't have to do that with you because you just naturally did it. It was
Yep,
perfect.
there we go.
But
rewind, listen again.
That's right. So, friends, you want to listen. So, here we go. I am so curious, Lisa. I have to guess that there was something that caused you to recognize that you shouldn't be afraid of change. I'm going to also guess it had something to do with some change in your life or something that happened. What happened to make you say, you know what? I don't need to be afraid of that. I need to embrace it.
Yeah, what a great question. I will joke with people sometimes. If you would have known me 10 or 15 years ago, I was a completely different person. And I would have been what you would describe as a type A personality. And I probably would have said, actually, it's type A plus, if we're really being specific here. It was sort of like to the max on all of those things, right? And I guess one way you could describe it is that my life has turned out to be a lot of best laid plans that did, in fact, not go according
Mm.
to best laid plans. And time again, I would just sort of feel like I was getting dragged kicking and screaming through the process. And a number of years ago, I just thought, wait, why am I fighting this? What am I fighting? And is there another way?
Mm.
And I have a background in holistic change work. And so it's always been there. It's all the baseline has kind of lived underneath the surface. But then it finally was ready to bubble up and just say, listen, it is time to stop fighting this and actually say, okay, let's reset. What does it look like if we can try a new way, if we
Yeah.
can carve out a different path? And that really has created such a different trajectory for my life in a very
Oh,
short period of
cool.
time. Yeah.
That is so cool. Okay, and I kind of love I know a lot of type A people, but I think they're probably gonna wanna steal your actually, it's an A plus, because I get that. But you said, "You know what? Okay, hold on. I can't keep striving for this because everything I've tried to do has not necessarily gone according to plan." You mentioned to me before we started that you used to live in Chicago. Now you're a New Yorker. You love it and it's wonderful, but that was a pandemic shift, right? So,
Yeah.
why don't we dig into that a little bit? Like, what happened besides the fact that the world shut down in 2020 that made you say, "All right, it's time. I need a different change of scenery. I need to try something new."
Absolutely. So I described a little bit to people, like for me, the pandemic had a way of revealing some cracks in the foundations.
Hmm.
And I think that showed up for different people very differently. Some people realized that they absolutely loved spending time on top of their family members and they could not get enough of it. And then there were other people that realized that they never wanted to be out of an office again. Like office is the best place for them because they realized that there was focus and that there was all of this positivity about leaving the home to do things when they realized it wasn't something in their life. For
Mm.
me, it became this really interesting opportunity of forced quiet. I'm a single person. I lived alone. And so it was a lot of quiet time, which is not something that I run away from still to this day. But this was a new layer for me.
Yeah.
And it really, really asked me to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And some kind of big questions came up. And one of them was, why did I actually choose this to live in Chicago, right? And what's keeping me here? And
Mm.
that was the more interesting question for me is what's keeping me here? Because we can spend a lot of time looking back and a lot of time regretting past decisions. But the more important question was, what do I want to do moving forward?
Yeah.
And so, kind of against all odds, I made this interesting choice to move to a city that people were fleeing from during the pandemic.
That's
And
true.
I don't regret 1 second of it because I was able to sort of come back online with the city. It was sort
Yeah.
of a neat way as New York was sort of re-enlivening itself. I was also getting to dip my feet in and plant some of my roots here. That was a really cool experience. But it really sort of catalyzed a whole series of events for me because I think it was not that I moved, not that I sort of did something major and uprooted my life. It was that I really made a commitment to listening to what I really wanted. And
Mm.
I think it was one of the first times I had really done that. And I find it so interesting about this topic of joy, the name of your podcast
Yeah,
is
yeah. Tell us more.
and for me, it was like I couldn't answer what brings me joy for a really long time
Mm.
because I could say the silly surfacey stuff. Oh, my friends bring me joy. Oh, I like when I can go out and have a really lovely meal or a great glass of wine or a cup of coffee. Anything like that. But that's not really deep joy. That's
Right.
kind of like surface like, "Oh, interesting. I got a little tickle there. That was kind of fun." But that's different than joy. Joy is that really deep-rooted space where you can drop in to letting go and sort of really embracing this space of who you are in your world.
Yeah.
And I think that is so unique. And it's something a lot of us lose as adults.
Yeah.
You're an educator, you know this, right? Like the way children learn, the way they approach the world just sort of trails off as we become super specialized in the
Mhm.
way we think, in the way we learn, in the way we, build skill sets, right? And so it's really fascinating. I really think the reason so much shifted for me was because I really listened to that little kernel of what would bring me a unique piece of joy that I hadn't yet given myself
Ugh,
in my
that's beautiful, and I love that you went on that journey, right? Like, I think a lot of us think about the journey, but don't actually go on the journey. We certainly don't move ourselves to New York City in the middle of a pandemic and all the things. Like, that's very courageous and also pretty special that you were seeking out that joy. Now, let me add the word productive to it. How would you describe productive joy? You've given us a great definition of joy.
Yeah, sure. So for me, the productive piece of it is like, how does it move you? It's like, what gets you unstuck? For me, that's productivity, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here, I can't figure out how to start my project, write the first page of my book, any of these things. We get in that moment where we're a little stuck. And that productivity piece is the unstuckness that gets us to start moving. And then the moving is the exploration, and the exploration is the change, right?
Yeah.
So it sort of feeds into this productivity loop of like the joy unlocks this ability for us to get unstuck. And
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
love that. I love that, right?
I love that too, Lisa, and I am so excited to kind of dig deeper because you've written a book about this.
Yes.
Let's see, Embracing the Unknown, Exploring the Pathways to Change.
Oh,
Super title, by the way.
really.
And I am sure there are some nuggets in there that are pretty fantastic. First of all, what prompted you to write a book? And then why this topic and how do we learn from you?
Thank you. Well, thanks for all of that. So, the book is something that has been working in the back of my system for a really long time. And that's the best way I'll describe it because I would, quote, sit down and start writing a book
Mm,
multiple times over
I
the
got you.
years. And I'd write 3 or 4 or 5 pages and then I'd go, oh my, what am I doing? I don't know how to write a book. And I do love writing and I do, love the process of distilling information. But it wasn't really until I sat back and I thought, if I had something to offer to others in this moment of time, what would it be? And I recognized my pattern, right? All of this, like I was saying, these best laid plans that did not go according to the path I thought I was going to take. And I had just sat with people over and over again, whether they were friends, whether they were people in professional spheres, whether it was people I was working with, that struggled with these same moments of this push and pull between, I know there's something more, I don't know how to get there, and I feel a little stuck.
Mm.
And so my first thought was, okay, we're going to write the how-to book, the quintessential how-to book on change and change in 5 easy steps or something like that, right? And as soon as I sat down, I thought, who am I to tell anyone how to change?
Yeah.
It is not for me. I'm not going to tell anybody to uproot their life and move to New York City if it's not for you.
Right.
And so I can't sit here and give you a formula. But what I can do is sit with you and ask you important questions.
Oh, nice.
These are the questions that are going to help you figure out where you want to go. So it was really important to me that this wasn't like a how to embrace the unknown or this was an invitational exploration in really what it means to change because you decide, we decide, all of us decide how, when, where, why we want to change. And some of us might look at our lives and just say, honestly, I'm super happy. I'm super grateful. This is exactly where I want to be. And I say, amazing. But I'm guessing there will be a moment when something sort of starts churning just a
Yeah.
little bit at first and
Yeah.
then louder. And often it gets to the point where it's so loud we can no longer ignore it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is what I think really was why the book wrote itself. I do say that. It wrote itself. I did a lot of typing, but the book wrote itself.
That is amazing. Well, and I know there are really two instances where that change bubbles up, right? Sometimes it's internal and you are wrestling with it and you're like, oh, I think I should do this. And it's that battle. And then there are other times when change is kind of done unto you. Oh, you're going to change jobs now, or you are going to get a promotion you were not expecting, or you are going to move, like it or don't. So this podcast is meant for leaders who want to do it differently. And I think great leaders have to embrace change. They have to recognize that it's the only constant and they have to do something with it. How might embracing the unknown help the leaders that are listening figure out how to navigate their space?
Absolutely. So it's funny because if I say to you, the unknown, it feels like this big, huge, like the image that pops into my brain is like the beginning of one of the Star Wars movies with like the scrolling words and the
Yes.
black, and it's just endless, right? Like this is
Yes.
what the unknown feels like. But if we start very granularly and just say, the unknown is anything we have not done
Mm.
yet.
Yes.
Right? So it's not like there's this whole bucket of things that you do not know about, that you have not experienced. Yeah, there are. There's always going to be things outside what we've experienced so far. But if we just break that down to say, like, we're not talking about taking on a whole universe. We're just talking about taking the next steps.
Mm.
And that is really a different frame of mind because I think leaders, especially especially leaders tasked with visioning, especially leaders leading really big groups of people, feel compelled to hold really broad spaces. And
Mm,
that's a huge skill and very, very important for steering the direction of an organization, a family, or any of these situations. But it's easy to get caught up in that and forget that actually it's not about some out there that you're eventually going to land on.
yeah.
Balance is not some sort of landing point. It's actually navigating all of the things that are happening at one time and keeping yourself where you want to go. That's
Ah,
really for me what balance is. So I think that's what I would say to leaders is flip things on their head. Start saying to yourself, is this really the reality of what I'm dealing with right now? Or is this a story I've been telling myself or a story that I've been taught to believe, right? And then sort of say, what happens if we just try looking at it upside down? Or, putting new glasses on and shooting it through a different lens. Because I think there's something really interesting there when we ask ourselves to actually kind of like do a 180 on the way we actually think about how we approach things.
ugh. Well, and this works for everybody, right? I can
Mhm.
absolutely see where your audience is anyone who is trying to navigate life and figure things out. Did you write it for a particular audience? Did you write it for, these people, or was it meant for all?
Well, so what you said was really funny because it's actually the first thing anybody in marketing will say to you is
Uh-huh.
you can't write for everybody, right? You need to pick
Yeah.
an audience. You need
Who's
to
your
I
avatar?
I have fought that tooth and nail.
Yeah.
Other thing I will say is I think we write there's a saying that you write the book you most need to read. And so
Uh-huh.
part of this is like this book was probably written for me. And there
Yeah.
are many moments when I'm talking to people I care for and trust in my life. And I will say to them, I just can't understand why. And they'll go, it's almost like somebody should have written a book about that.
You're like, "Shh, dang it."
And I want exactly, and I'll go, oh gosh, you right? Because it's all right there. But really, my approach was to start off, it's in kind of three sections. The first is to say, why change? Like
Mhm.
really ask ourselves, why? Why should we change? And what does it mean to change? Changing now, like actually digging into some of the tools, resources, all of these things. And then the last part of the book is actually called Changing Forever. And what does it mean to actually set up a set of core values in our life that allow us to live a lifestyle in change so that we are always in this mode, this cycle of being ready for the next thing that comes up? This is where the relationship comes in because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're calling again. Let's see what we can play with. Let's see what's going to happen next. What opportunities are on the horizon for me? And that is a really interesting process that I don't think we always talk about when we're looking at change. We're really looking at the whole like, how do I manage what's happening right now
Right.
and get next thing? But if we can blow that up to say, I don't just want to talk to people about how to change now or why it's important to change, but what it means to actually help ourselves become the next versions of who we're going to be in the world. Because that's really what it is. It's an adventure of like honoring the places we've been and the people we're yet to become.
Ugh,
And I love
that's
that. I love that.
beautifully well said. And
Yeah.
as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the people that I work with and the spaces that we're in frequently where there is a change that is either done unto us or that
Mhm.
we have instigated, but we're not sure how to navigate. And I can see where your book and your expertise would be really helpful to get all of us on the same page to embrace the change instead of be afraid of the change. Is that the kind of work that you do? Do you do that sort of work with organizations or where can we find you, Lisa?
Where can we find you? Yeah, so I've been dabbling with since the book came out. I've been dabbling with different ways and how this looks. I've run a couple of what I call change labs, which are group settings for people to kind of dig into what this means and kind of have a lab space to
Yeah,
explore it when they're not necessarily in the middle of it. I
smart.
always talk to people when you're actively going through a really challenging transition, it's probably not the time to stretch your skill set and say, how can we be more friendly to this moment that I'm in, right? Sometimes it's really important to just respect exactly where we are and
Yeah.
what we need to do to get through it. And there is no shame in that.
No.
So this lab space was a fun way to kind of dig into that. And I run these at various times. I do also have a one-on-one, I call it guided, a 3-month journey where I work with people one-on-one to dig into a little bit more of what they need, the support they need to do that. It's fascinating. There's a lot of work on organizational change. There's a lot of research on organizational change, barely any on personal change.
Mm.
I think it's because it's so individual. So a lot of companies and organizations are dealing with the change of their company, of their group, of their thing. But I think it's time to turn the mirror kind of back inward to say, let's just look at our own capacity for these kinds of skills and tools and resources. And it will make you a better leader, and it will make you a better employee, and it will make you a better whatever you are, right?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
you move through the world. So those are sort of two short ways. Of course, I would love for people to visit my website, grab a copy of my book. I'd love to give your listeners, a 99-cent ebook if they want, if they would like to, grab a copy and dig in. That would make me really happy. And I think there's a piece about this that's just to say it doesn't have to be a slog. It doesn't have to be something that is fearful or always just difficult. Like if we can find the joy, if we can find the fun. I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like, what is it like if we like press play on words, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Play in our life, start moving, but start exploring and digging in to this space, right? Like that's such a cool thing. And a couple months ago, earlier this summer, I literally found myself in a pool with my friend's 13-year-old daughter wearing a mermaid fin. And we were swimming around. And I really don't think I understood from a physical level what it was like to play at this age of my life until I was literally corkscrewing like through the water wearing a mermaid fin. And she was giggling, going, "You're such a natural. Let's mermaid a little bit more. And it was such a wonderful moment because I thought, oh, this is what it feels like to play.
Yeah.
Not just like, I'm playing, look at me, I'm playing the game, I'm exploring this, but really dig into that sort of like I was talking about earlier, that deep sense of like bubble up, effervescent laughter that can arise in this space of like, I'm just enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And for me, like that is productive joy. That is the kind of joy that takes us somewhere.
Well, and I think we need more of that, right? My number one regret, my kids are 23,
Mhm.
and my one regret as a parent is that I didn't play more. It was always I'm making dinner, you go play. Because they were twins, it was really easy for me to put the two of them in a room and just say figure it out. And then, Chloe would cry because Jackson wouldn't play with her and yeah, but I never sat down on the floor. I shouldn't say never. I didn't often enough sit down on the
Mhm.
floor and play with them. And I think that's probably a lesson for any parent that's listening that has littles. Just play. Put on the mermaid tail. Let yourself be in the moment. I think that does lead to the ability to change because you are all of the sudden giving yourself permission to be something that you aren't normally, right? Like be that,
And
that
what
thing.
a gift. What a gift to tap into different pieces of yourself and to let your children or your friends even see a side of you that is so different than they're used to seeing.
Yeah.
I have had moments where I catch myself going like, I'm so happy today, like with a scowl on my face, right? And when our face is not matching what our mouth says, right? What comes out of our mouth. But there is this moment because it really is a gift. And it's one of the biggest compliments when I've reached a certain point in my relationships with people when they'll sort of look at me and go, actually, you're really funny. And I'm thinking, well, I am who I always am. But I've realized that it takes a little bit of a disarming. It
Yeah.
takes some time to get to that point where I can really sort of show up in this open way. And it's a gift not only for yourselves, but for the people around you. So as leaders, even, it's interesting concept to lean into what that feels like too, to show a little bit more of that kind of playful side. And we can do that without sort of losing the core of what's important about leadership in terms of quality or skill set or anything like that, but just bringing a different dimension.
Well, and I hear you fully. And what I think I'm learning, right? The older I get, and anybody who's listened to this podcast at all has heard me at some point say, be your authentic self. I know I'm a lot, but I've learned to own my a lotness and be who I'm supposed to be. But I think society has given us these rules, right? A CEO dresses like this, a salesperson dresses like that. You can't possibly wear your tennis shoes at work, and now sneakers cost a whole lot more than most any other shoe, right? And that's just one way we show up inauthentically sometimes in spaces. And I think what I'm learning to embrace is I'm going to wear the tennis shoes because my feet hurt if I don't. And I'm going to be okay with my sparkly tennis shoes. And if you're not, that's okay. But just understand I'm just as professional as you are. Or I'm going to laugh in an interview because then I get to be me and you get to see me and I don't have to be stuffy, right? So
Mm.
that's what I'm hearing you say is that the more we recognize that it's okay to not fit in the box that somebody created, because who was responsible for that box anyway? And we need to just learn to be ourselves. I think that's what I'm taking away is that change, you don't have to be afraid of change, but you also don't have to fit in the box that you've created that doesn't even actually exist.
So well said. I always joke the world is designed for the average person, of which no one actually is.
That's
Right?
powerful.
Right? So it's like even like the height of chairs, right? Like I'm not a tall person. I'm on the shorter side of the spectrum. So it's sort of like I can never find chairs that work for me, right? But tall people have the same issue
Yeah.
because their chairs are too short. So it's
Yeah.
sort of like if we remind ourselves that conforming to that norm is really like who's it for, right? Like
Who gets to say what normal is? And you know what, Lisa, I'm okay with not being normal because that feels boring to me. So I know I could talk to you all day, but we don't have all day. So I want to ask you a couple rapid fire questions that I think are going to be fun just based on what we just talked about. Are you ready?
sure, sure.
Okay. So the first one is how do you define fun?
Oh gosh, laughter.
Mm,
Absolutely laughter.
love it. Me too. I would agree. How do you know that you're showing up as your authentic self?
I could talk about this for probably an hour. So I would really try to distill this lightning down. Inner alignment. I
Oh,
will call it that. I there is a deep sense of recognizing that like I'm a little bit off kilter internally if I'm not showing up as my authentic self.
Oh, I like that. So knowing yourself well enough to know when you're not centered. That's good.
We all get those little cues, right? Like
Yeah.
little like something, some people will call it like something in the pit of their stomach or something that just feels a little hot rush, any of these little body indicators. And for me, those are instant like, ooh, I'm just like not totally in inner alignment with
Mm,
dropping into who I am.
nice, nice. Okay, so how do you channel your best self on your worst days?
I actually let myself be a weeping, wallowy mess of like, I am just messy today. And I have learned that I need to be just as grateful for the messy days as the days when I feel really, really shiny. So I have learned to do that by embracing those moments.
I love that. Love that. Okay, last question.
Mhm.
What do you really want people to remember about today? If they can't remember anything else, because reality says after 30 minutes, they're only going to really remember one thing. What would that one thing be?
You always have a choice. And really like choice is right there. And I laugh because it's like not choosing is also a choice, right? So we really always have a choice. And if you take that as your lens to look out into the world, it's like all of a sudden you see in technicolor because there's this beautiful space of going like, oh my god, I could choose anything right now. And that could be like what coffee I want to have, what road I want to walk down, anything, right? But like it's all there available to us. And that pathway starts to just like really lighten things up as we move through the world.
What a beautiful bow that you just wrapped on our time together. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for choosing to spend time with us today. Thank you for sharing with the world who you are and what you're all about and your book, which I'm super excited for people to get. So we'll throw all of those things in the show notes too. But I just want to say thank you because there are a whole lot of things you could have been doing besides this, but you chose to spend a little time with our Productive Joy family. So thank you for being here.
Yes, and thank you for sharing the message because this is what moves us, right? Productive joy. It'll take us there. So supporting your work, wildly celebrating your mission in the world.
Thank you. Well, I'm having an awful lot of fun with it. And for all of our Productive Joy listeners, you guys know the drill. There is something in here for you. So, my goal is always to give you a nugget that you can use right away. Lisa did not disappoint with that. So, whether it's that you are embracing change or deciding not to be afraid of it or figuring out that you don't have to fit in the box or whatever it is you're taking away today, my challenge to you is to figure out a way to turn fun into action.